Hey guys, Sean and Emily here.
Welcome to the Silver Lining Studio, aka our living room. There are a number of things in our living room that we think make our little space super comfortable.
Like our doozy candles.
And my super awesome, wicked sweet stereo system.
But we've been getting a lot of comments and compliments on our plants. So we decided to give you guys a little tour.
So in honor of today being 4/20, 2020, how many 20s? 3 20s?
A couple 20s.
Almost 4/20s, finally. We're going to give you our Silver Lining Studio, aka our living room, plant tour.
You can turn your head about any direction in our apartment and you'll be able to see a little plant baby.
Growing up, my mom and dad's house was always filled with houseplants, and so all of my living spaces have been filled with plants too.
And I used to kill plants, but I'm learning.
You are getting a lot better.
Now, let's introduce you to some of the little plant friends you may have seen on our show.
And to some of the ones that live off screen too. All right, so up here, we have what's known commonly as a rubber plant, but it's also, as I learned recently, known as a Ficus elastica. That'd make a good band name.
So this is a dwarf fiddle leaf fig, and it's one of my favorites. Not my most favorite, but don't tell it. And if you notice in here, you'll find hidden treasures in a lot of our houseplants. Sean collects these little seashells when he goes on vacation and makes little mushrooms in them.
This is an anthurium. You can see it's got great big beautiful heart-shaped spear-like leaves. This plant is in one of my favorite flower pots that we have. It's West German pottery. I got it from a great place called Vanier Moderns. And the plant itself was a gift from none other than Mr. Paul Donahue, a.k.a. Paul or Nothing. Ooh, yeah! Thanks, Paul, for this plant. If we do our job right, Emily and I, one day it'll grow great big waxy flute-like red flowers.
So this is a Sansevieria, otherwise known as a snake plant, otherwise known as mother-in-law's tongue, because I've heard somewhere along the line that it's very difficult to kill. I gave this little guy to Sean as a gift, and if you look in there, there's another little hidden mushroom.
This is a Schefflera. This particular Schefflera was a gift from my brother, who clipped it off of a plant that used to belong to our Oma, our grandmother. And that plant is now probably about 20 or 30 years old and as tall as I am. But one of my favorite things about the Schefflera is that it has these hand-like leaves that spread right out. And some plants' leaves unfurl as soon as they sprout one. But this one, the Schefflera's leaves look exactly the way that they look when they're grown, but little teeny tiny versions. And I think that's super duper cute.
Welcome to my favorite seat on the couch. These little guys I bought at Home Depot, which is one of the best places to buy plants, I think. This one here is an inch plant or a wandering Jew, and the leaves are very shiny and have a purple tint to it, and it likes to climb towards the light. These two here, they're called radiator plants, and I just learned that actually, and it's quite cute because they live on the radiator. They're both in the same family. This is a pilea. It hasn't stopped growing new leaves since I bought it, and there's 3 tiny little babies growing in it. You can see them down here. Next, this is a peperomia, also very happy where it lives. Keeps growing new plants, and it has this weird growth on the side in the pot that I don't know what it is.
This is a yucca plant. When you find them in the stores and in the nurseries, they have a stalk that's probably about the size of a baseball bat. This one's so small, it was part of a much larger plant that belonged to my sister. It was a gift to her from her husband, Pat, for their anniversary. It was called Annie the Anniversary Plant. And they brought Annie over here one day, and Annie died. So it was the wintertime, I had it off in a corner of the apartment. And one day I looked down and there was this little teeny green sprig growing out of the dead stump. I hadn't watered it in probably about 6 months. and I put it in some water, and it grew roots. And now look at it. Annie, the anniversary yucca.
And this
Jeez.
is Big Mama Aloe. We've given lots of her little babies to friends over the years, but she just keeps growing new little guys. Very strong and happy, and lives underneath, right next to the radiator.
This is a Monstera. This is one of our newest plants. The pot, the plate, and the plant were all a Christmas gift from Joe to me. You'll see I got another one of our little mushrooms in there. This is one of the prettier mushrooms. Behind Emily and Dave when they're doing their thing during our show, this vine plant is called a pothos. So we have a few of these different vine plants. Whenever you see a vine plant in the store, it's usually a pothos. They're super easy to care for. They're super easy to propagate. They last for a really long time, and they don't need a whole lot of maintenance. This is our kitchen windowsill. That's a little baby off of that giant aloe from the living room that fanned out. And all along the windowsill, among little knickknacks and treasures, are our tiny little succulents. It's become very popular for people to give succulents away at weddings. So that's where most of these came from. Either they were gifts at the table, or I stole them out of the centerpieces. You can see maybe a little mushroom in there, in the top of that weird looking succulent. And that goofy looking tall one with the two spires is called a pickle plant. Right up next to the pickle plant, hanging in a ball of glass, is a gift from Simon at the Heart and Crown, who often sits at the end of the bar, and he's got tons of plants that he carries around with him. He gave me that air plant and the glass ball that it came in. It's just a staghorn fern stuffed in a ball of peat moss. All these little plants, happy and shining in the sun. These are my African violets. You know, at the grocery store checkout counter, they always have African violets just sitting there. And some people buy chocolate bars, some people buy guilty pleasure magazines. I like to come away from the grocery store with an African violet. My Oma had African violets everywhere in her house, and they love to grow towards the sun. You see this one here has been doing that all day long, and they love an east-facing window. My Oma always had her African violets in an east-facing window. These have been flowering for a long time. They love it here in this window. You see they're quite a bit bigger than the ones down below, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this purple one has decided to join the club and has been flowering for a long time too. African violets are a little more difficult to care for, but if you do a half-decent job and you pay attention to what they need, you have a beautiful flowering plant.
So Sean likes to steal things from weddings, and these two guys were taken when he took a garbage bag filled with succulents home from his cousin's wedding and came home to find he didn't have his keys, had to break in through his bedroom window with a garbage bag filled with plants like Santa Claus, and they've been thriving here in our bathroom, so much so that this little guy is worried he might get crushed by this large succulent.
This is a fern, not a very healthy looking fern. It's hanging on, but it's been hanging on for a long time. This was my sister's plant. She called it Fern, but I changed his name to Vern with a V. So now we can call him Vern, the half-dead fern. Here are other vine plants. I think these ones are both golden pothos. I'm not sure. One sometimes looks a little bit like a marbled pothos, and this one here looks a little bit like a neon pothos. I guess that brings us to this great big beautiful plant right here. This plant is called a Dieffenbachia, or a dumb cane. It's called a dumb cane because apparently if you eat one of these leaves, it'll make your tongue and throat, vocal cords go numb and you won't be able to speak. This is the oldest and definitely the biggest plant in our apartment. I've had this plant for probably, I'd say probably about 10, 12, maybe even closer to 15 years. I got it from a roommate whose plant was almost as big as this, and we just took the top off and made it grow to this size. And we've taken pieces and given it to friends over the years, and it just keeps getting taller and stronger and more beautiful with age. So there you have it, the biggest plant in our apartment, the Dieffenbachia.
And that's that.
Thanks for joining us on our 420 20 plant tour. Thanks so much for tuning into the Silver Linings.
Peace and love.